Welcome to another episode of the Profitable Home Services Podcast. Once again, I'm so glad you could join us. We got another fantastic guest lined up for today, so you're going to want to pay special attention, probably want to take a few notes, because Lynn has some great information to share with us. So join me as we welcome Lynn Wise from Contractor In Charge. She is somebody that I found in one of my clients' QuickBooks files. I love being able to go in and do work with clients and look at their vendors. Who are they spending money with? How can I bring some of those vendors and their knowledge to you guys out there in the home services industry? So welcome, Lynn. I'm so glad to have you with us today.
Thanks, Diane. Glad to be here. Glad we had the opportunity to meet.
Yes, this is going to be a great partnership going forward because we are both passionate about helping those home service businesses become more profitable, finding those ways that money is leaking out of their businesses and they don't even know it because it's silent. It's quietly leaking out. I often wish that there was some way that these profit leaks had these big, fancy, bright lights or something saying, find me, I'm right here. But they don't. You have to go digging for them. And I think so often these home service business owners, they're so busy keeping all the calls being made, keeping the jobs going, getting them done on time if you can, making sure that the parts are getting ordered, making sure that the invoicing is getting done and the payments are getting collected and their team is trained and all this kind of stuff that they're not always watching their numbers. And this is where you come in, where I come in, where we can get them to step back a little bit and say, ooh, maybe I better be paying attention here. I know it's one more thing for them to watch. And before you guys are rolling your eyes, because I know you are, here's one more thing. This is an important area of your business, is to know those numbers. And you've heard me talk about it before on other episodes about knowing your numbers. And I'm not just talking about your balance sheet and your profit and loss statement. I'm talking about other areas inside the business. So Lynn, why don't we start out with, I know that there's areas that you've seen where profits just, they don't drip out one drip at a time. They are oozing out in a solid, steady stream of profits just oozing out of businesses. Let's talk about a couple of those and then maybe we'll unpack a couple.
Sounds like a plan.
So what's a very common one that you see all the time working with home service businesses?
Why don't we start with internal operations?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a very good one.
So what I see is we tend to hire folks and have job roles and responsibilities that don't allow us to really be productive with the tasks that are associated with those jobs, roles, and responsibilities. What does that mean? So my classic example is you've got somebody who answers the phone. And by the way, they're really good at qualifying and booking appointments for jobs and estimates. Got it down pat, know how to do it, but they also answer customer service calls or vendor calls or calls that aren't revenue oriented, right?
Okay.
Just a little statistic, probably very consistently in the trades, at least, only about 30% of the call volume are attributed to booking or to revenue-oriented jobs, bookable jobs. 70% of the calls that are received in the office are everything else. When's my technician going to arrive? Can I pay my bill? I need a copy of my invoice. It was installed 2 years ago, and I don't think there should be a charge. And typically those types of calls, those latter calls, can be lengthy because you want to be patient, you want to have a servitude attitude. And so what happens is if you have too few resources to qualify and book inbound phone calls or leads with a speed to lead factor, and you've got that resource tied up getting paying attention to somebody sending an invoice or hearing about why or why not there should be charges on a job, or where's my technician, guess what happens? Those revenue jobs, revenue opportunities are going to voicemail or abandoned call or to an overflow third-party answering service. So optimizing your resources so that they're focused on the right task can make a difference in your internal operations for sure, but more importantly, your top line revenue.
I can see that having a big impact. 'Cause I know even here in my own office, how many of the calls that come through are, I got an IRS notice. I don't know what to do with this. How do you want me to upload this file? Can I just mail it to you? I don't see a copy of whatever. And those
That's
things
right.
can eat up a chunk of your day. And
They
not
eat
that
up
they're
a
not
big chunk.
important, because they are.
Right.
That's how you build
Yes.
relationship with your current customers.
Yes.
But having somebody strategically dedicated to those new calls would be a big game changer, I would think.
That is correct. So a big phenomenon in, especially in peak season, you have what we call in the call center concurrency of calls. So because demand is high, supply is low, you get a bunch of things all at once, and then you have to figure out how to redistribute them. And the fact of the matter, if you looked at just the type of calls and then route calls to the right resource, you would streamline the revenue producing opportunities. So we think of 5 roles in the internal operations for handling leads. The first one is what we call a booking agent, somebody who qualifies and books opportunities, those being jobs and estimates in the trades. Second one is customer service, those being what we just talked about, need a copy of, where's my tech? Obviously field and dispatch, so you got to have somebody to make sure the board's optimized and you've got good communication with the technicians and the customers that you're trying to serve. And the last one is inside sales, but we have one that we now have added, which is AI. So what's the role of AI in your internal operations? So we've got actually 5 roles that we talk about. What we know is that we're a company that are people and bots, not people.
Okay.
Why do we believe that way? Because when somebody calls, especially on a phone, they expect to speak to somebody.
They do. They hate being routed to a number.
When they're not spoken to, they change their whole attitude. You can hear it when you listen to these calls. Not that some task, like, for example, if there's a message to be left, it's no different than leaving a voicemail in some ways, right?
Right.
So if there's a message to be left, it has a role. That's a task that definitely could be handled by a bot. Collecting information for sending out an invoice, like we just talked about. Good one you just brought up are instructions. So, if it's, they say I need instructions to do appropriate upload of a document, you could very well just go ahead and have those instructions automated. You don't need to have somebody answer that phone necessarily. The other one, though, that we don't spend a lot of time with sometimes, only when we need to, is inside sales. So doing the appropriate follow-up of jobs that weren't sold, upsells, contact with your existing customer base just to say hi and check in, all those things about building your brand with your customer base. What I tend to see is that our customers, many of them just do them when they have time versus being diligent in doing them every day, every week, every month, and staying on top of it. and being consistent and making it somebody's role and responsibility. And again, they'll say, well, that's a cost benefit analysis. I understand that. However, in that scheduling and that job task and assignment that you have in your office, it's essential. So how can you not do it? So you need to figure out, both with internal and third-party partners like us, how you can budget this and be efficient at doing it with consistency.
I know
That's
I'm guilty.
profit leak that we see continuously. Yeah.
I'm guilty of that myself.
Mhm.
Things slow down a little bit, you start doing more of that. You get really busy,
Right.
you put it aside.
That's
So,
right.
yeah, if I'm doing it, other people are doing it too, just
Yes.
because you get busy and you have limited resources.
That's
So
right.
that's cool that there's other options out there that you can make that happen.
Yeah, so many times, the operator or the business who would coordinate with a company like us, they don't understand that the task and the processes that they want to have serviced can actually be designed to fit their business. And it can be done on a part-time basis. It can be done on a full-time basis. It can be done in what we call a shared environment, which is a bit more limited because you're more standardized. But the thing is that there are resources. Just call a company like Contractor In Charge and talk through what you're thinking. You might be pleasingly surprised.
Well, and as you were talking about that, I could think of somebody going, wait a minute, I can't afford to hire another person. But
Correct.
they don't necessarily need to hire somebody. We can start small and then work into maybe a mid-size or a bigger package as you see it starting to work in your business. And so
We absolutely
that's a
do
nice
that.
way to go.
Yeah, Diane,
Yeah.
we do that. We do it, as I always say, we're a supplemental or we're full-time. Which do
Uh-huh.
you need?
Right.
So to your point, you may not need a full-time person, and you might even have trouble finding the skill set that we could offer. So there
Mhm.
are options that you can actually use. You just need to ask the question.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that, Lynn, because I've heard that from several of the businesses that I coach with about how they struggle in this area and they don't have anybody in-house who necessarily either has the skill set or wants to do it.
Wants to do it. Yeah. It's
And that's
often
the
the
big thing.
latter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
If
Yes.
they don't want to do it, it's not going to get done. Everything else will get done, but that piece is uncomfortable to them. And so they'll do a little tiny bit hit and miss, but they won't be consistent about it.
That is correct. And that is probably a bigger issue than actually having somebody assigned to the role or responsibility.
Right.
But I also say, I've said this to some of the business owners, that you hired them to do one thing and then you have them do something else. And so there's not a match. How many times have you worked with a company where the bookkeeper was answering the phone and the bookkeeper hated to answer the phone? Absolutely hated to answer the phone.
Yeah.
Because that's not their comfort zone. That's not their aptitude.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And they're trying to wait on a front counter or something at the same time. You cannot do a good job in your bookkeeping role when you're trying to do wear other hats like that as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
That is right. So profit leak, mismatch of skills, not a well thought out job role and responsibility. Using some innovation to get these things done is probably the right answer.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say along with that's going to come a mindset shift.
Yes.
Because if in our heads, if we're saying, well, I can't afford to do that. I don't, so-and-so that's, similar to me in business doesn't have anybody doing that in his business. And so that mindset starts stepping in that says, is this for real or is this just a bunch of baloney? And doing that mindset shift that says, I want to work on my business, this being one of those areas that you can have this conversation and start working on this particular area of your business and watching what it does. I'm positive it'll yield some huge results for people.
Oh, it will. If you can sell one more job per day,
Mhm.
it definitely will yield some results. One thing that I would point out, the new profit leak is conversational AI bots.
Okay.
Even though I would say there's a place for them, you got to figure out what that is.
Mhm. Where they belong.
Their abandon rate is between 30 and 35%. So in other
Okay.
words, people get the bot and 30% of the time people will hang up. So, and I just recently said this to an ex-client that went to a bot. I said, if that was us, you would hang me. You would hang me. Well, the difference is that it's technology and people expect differently, but you're losing jobs. And so this is the new profit leak. Pay attention with
Mhm.
automation, what the leaks are, because there are leaks in automations and in the new AI technologies. Pay attention to those and understand what is going on. So, for example, if it is answering the phone, ensure that it does it at a 95% rate, which is what our abandon rate runs anywhere between 5 and 3% on a given day. We lose calls. Every
Mhm.
call center does.
Yep.
We do not abandon 30% of the time. Absolutely. In fact, it would kill our business.
Right. Right.
Uh, if it's booking jobs in software, make sure that it's doing it accurately. How much rework is it causing your team because it makes mistakes?
Right.
How much are you paying to watch it? So we tend to believe that we're at this point where technology is absolutely imperative, but it's more with a hybrid approach, meaning technology and what we call human in the loop, right? So
Mhm.
making sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, optimizing it to improve its effect, its success. But don't assume because it's software and um it's cool, it works when you use it, that it's working the way that you think it should be working. So pay attention. That's the new profit leak I would warn every business about. Pay attention.
So when we use a hybrid approach, that allows us to use the best of both worlds, it sounds like.
That is correct.
Yeah. Because I could just see people getting frustrated with a bot answering him. And I've got several of my coaching clients using those types of bots because they were frustrated with their phones not getting answered.
So you got to balance the act, right? So one thing that bots will do is answer every phone call. They absolutely will, which is a good thing. The
Mhm.
thing that you've got to understand is even though they'll answer the phone call, how many people are hanging up?
Right.
In fact, what our stats told us on 30 some odd thousand calls last year was about a 35% abandon rate. 68% of the time, if you offer an agent as an alternative, they're going to choose an agent.
You bet. Yep.
And then about 22% of the time, they're actually hanging up and calling back multiple times. So now you're actually increasing because they want a different result, right?
Different, right. Different
So
choice.
yeah, so being aware of what the behaviors are of the consumer. One thing I will say, the technology is pretty good.
Hmm.
Consumers don't like it.
Right.
That's the piece that needs to be managed. And so therefore thinking through how and why you use a bot. So for example, let's use this role and responsibility thing that we talked about earlier. Use the bot for some customer service type questions,
Okay.
but use the person to do the qualification and booking of jobs and estimates.
Give them that real person when that first impression of you and your company is a real person who cares.
That's right. Build
Yeah.
trust, build a
Yeah.
relationship, have empathy when appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Bots don't have emotion.
They don't.
And so when there's an urgent need, people don't care for that type of technology.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a general statement. That certainly, that's going to depend. But even I have younger people on my team that they don't want to talk to a bot either. Not when it's urgent. So,
Right. When it's
but
urgent. Yeah.
right, but use the technology so it's more of a managed
Mm-hmm.
call.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's like, for example, instructions, how to upload something, I want to get a copy of my invoice. I'd like to have pay my bill. I'd like to learn more about what other service you might deliver against or whatever, but be more methodical in thinking through what calls it should answer.
I love that because now we're using the strengths from both your humans and your bots and
There you
getting a
go.
much better result in the long term.
That's correct.
Right. Yeah.
That is correct.
Yeah.
I'll give you a good example that I thought was real interesting. Had a client's customer who liked the bot, got to the end of the bot, and he didn't like the times that he was offered for his appointment. And it wouldn't allow him to transfer to an agent. So he hung
Oh,
up
okay.
and he called somebody else.
Uh-huh.
So he didn't have anything against the bot, but he didn't like what happened. So
Right.
he
Yeah.
didn't know how else to do it. It's kind of like I go to Home Depot and they don't have something. So I go on Amazon and order it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So be aware of what these bots can do and also help you with it. I'm not saying no, not bots. I'm
Mhm.
saying why bots.
Right.
So why would you use a bot and how would you use it?
And that's going to bring me to the concept of friction. Are
Yes.
we putting friction in the way of somebody being able to complete whatever the action is that they want to complete with your company?
So
So,
the answer is absolutely.
right. And
Friction is a big deal. And the
the
more
real thing.
you put in,
Mm-hmm.
right, and more friction you put into a process, the harder it is to uh end up with the result that you want.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, recently I was a guest on another podcast, and by the time I filled out all of their questionnaire, all of the background stuff they wanted, it took me 45 minutes to fill
Wow.
out everything they wanted to be able to come on their 30-minute podcast. And I thought, talk about friction. I almost gave up about halfway through. It's like, I am so busy. My time is so tight. And you want me to fill out all this stuff. That's a really good example of putting friction in the way of being able to work with that company.
Yes.
Almost made
Yes.
me give up. And so
Yes.
are we doing that? Whether it's a person or a bot, are we putting unnecessary friction out there that keeps people from being able to just do whatever it is the thing that they're trying to do?
Yeah, but Diane, I think that is one of the frustrations of the consumer is that you're making it hard for me.
Right. Yeah. Don't make it so
And
hard.
right. And by the way, I would say that most people that use the telephone to call a business expect to speak to a person.
They do.
So they feel duped.
Right.
And so, the auto attendants that have been around for 25 years, people still don't like auto attendants. They,
I hate them. I hate them. Yeah.
I would say, as someone who manages a call center, if you do them and do them right, they can work very well and end up with a better result.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, short, concise descriptions of why to choose one, choose two, choose three,
Right.
very few selections, and make those so that they can do it without a whole lot of direction, right? So, and they end up where they intend to be, and then also have your team whether it's their job role or responsibility, not to take a message and have somebody call them back. Transfer the call to the intended person that
Right.
should have got the call. Or explain that the other person is busy and that they need to speak to that person. Can you leave a voicemail and I'll make sure they call you back? So
Mhm.
good old customer service is what I would say.
Right. Yeah. And going back to treating people the way we'd like to be treated ourselves.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Yep. Well, this has been good. How can some of this measuring of the numbers roll over into their bookkeeping, whether it's their internal bookkeeper or maybe it's an outsourced bookkeeper? How can we roll some of that into this as well?
Well, those numbers that we just talked about are about top line revenue. So it's
Correct.
understanding change in revenue, understanding change in cost in the bookkeeping side, and why it happened. So did sales go up? You can get minute and you can measure and, on the operational side, for example, Diane's answering more phone calls and booking more jobs, for example. That's not a bookkeeping number, right?
No, no.
But if you book more jobs, the ideal situation is it will result in more sales. So the bookkeeping understanding really comes, I believe, from a professional like you or I, who can help them dig into why. So, I always say to my clients, when there's a change in a number or a trend in a number, why?
Mhm.
And usually they can explain it, or they can have a pretty good hypothesis as to why that
Right.
changed. Very few times you ask a client why, they just flat say, I don't know. They really they do have a gut. They've been doing it long enough and they
Yes,
understand.
yes. Yeah.
And my hope when I ask why is to make them dig deeper and go, okay, how?
How? Right.
Right. So how? So how do I get more of that and get less of this? Or what's my alternative to doing it the way I'm doing it? And how do I change it? So my why always is about, what are you going to do? So that's the bookkeeping connection in my mind.
Right. And hopefully that bookkeeper is feeding them good solid numbers so that when somebody like yourself or myself sits down with them, we've got realistic numbers that we can count on, that we can say, yes, we have faith in these numbers. And we can then start looking at various KPIs that we might be tracking, whether it's number of calls, average price of jobs. Is our average starting to creep its way up? Okay, why? Oh, because we're offering this other service in addition when we go out to, install or wherever it might be. And digging deeper into that and being able to see how these numbers work together. More calls equals generally
Or
more sales.
right, and average ticket changes and things like that. And the good news is, most of the clients that I work with have field service management software that are real-time numbers that track that. And I always encourage my clients to manage their business with their operational software, their field service management software, understand the results of the operations in their financials.
Right. Because
So
they do go hand in hand. A
they do
lot
go
of
hand in
times,
hand, but you can't
yeah,
fix something after it happened.
no.
Got to
No.
look at the results and then decide, how do I change the future? And that's
Mhm.
where the financials come in.
Right. A lot of times I'll build out just a small little spreadsheet with 4, 5, 6 areas that we're monitoring numbers on, because in that real time, they don't necessarily document it anywhere, and then it's changed the next time they go in. And so periodically, kind of grabbing that little bit of a snapshot of what's going on, drop it into a spreadsheet of some sort, so that as we meet, we can start comparing. Maybe it's 1 week over another week or a month to another month, whatever it might be. Each client's different, but having that place that you can go to say, oh yeah, we are gaining ground, or oh no, we're not gaining ground. Let's go back and dig a little deeper.
Right.
And so that's been very helpful for them. Because they all tell me, well, I've got it, Service Titan's got it in there, but when's the last time you stopped? Or whatever, House Call Pro, whatever program they're using has it, but when's the last time did you stop and take that snapshot of how are we
Or on
doing?
the
Where are we
appropriate
at?
reports. There are some
Right.
pretty good reports that can, give them the information on
Yeah.
a
But they get busy and they forget to run the reports, take the
but again,
snapshot.
this is like job roles and
It
responsibilities. So
is.
somebody's role and responsibility should be to pull productivity reports and efficient reports that can help you have insight. And I have lots of clients that use these reports on a regular basis, have them set up to email to themselves so that they can see the change. And we talk about that in our meetings. So but the point being is that yes, it will translate into the financials. It will
Will.
absolutely.
They
And
do
to your
hand in
point,
hand.
right. And to your point, one of the things that I'm a huge fan of, I know you are too, is organization of the financials so that you can understand them. So that's your chart of accounts and how you organize it instead of having hither and yon approach. The other thing is understanding when you organize it, how the grouping of overhead and expenses are so relative to the revenue. And it's your gauge. Am I consistent? Is my ratio of direct labor consistent month over month, year over year? Are my overhead expenses consistent? Are there trends that I need to be paying attention to? And that's the organization. Having good data, you need to have a bookkeeper who understands your operations as well as your bookkeeping.
Right.
Meaning,
Not just the bookkeeping or how to
that's
get
right.
data input.
That's right. So
Yeah.
is the data being input properly? What's good data versus bad data? And making sure that documentation is the backbone of the bookkeeping system that you're using. Vendor statements, loan statements, asset documentation, etc. And I know as a bookkeeper that sometimes that's hard stuff to get a hold of.
It is, right. But I see so many bookkeepers nowadays that they're good at importing data from a program into maybe their QuickBooks or whatever they're importing it into, but they don't ever step back and say, does that look reasonable? They just import the data, pay whatever the bills and move on, ship out some invoices and move on.
Data
And
input.
yeah,
Right.
all they are is a data input clerk. And
Well, I
we
actually
need
think
more.
that's the difference between bookkeeping and accounting, right? So bookkeepers are bookkeepers and accountants are on the analytical side. They're the ones that compile and finance the financial statements and who should be helping their clients understand the financial statements. I see too many data input folks
Right.
that don't understand why the data was input. I guess
Right. They
that's what
have
I'm
no
saying.
clue.
They have no
Yeah.
clue. They have no clue. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
And I think our a lot of times our business owners, they aren't comfortable enough with the numbers themselves, and so they just blindly accept whatever the data input clerk has input into their
Diane,
system,
I think
and
you're right.
not even realizing that it isn't an accurate reflection of your business.
That's right.
And so
No,
being
absolutely.
aware that there is a huge difference from just a data input person to somebody who can come in and analyze and sit down with you and ask those hard questions, peel back that onion, get a couple layers deep and figure out what's really going on in your business.
Well, and I know you see this also, and this again, let's talk about profit links, right? Here's the big one, right? So what we see a lot of times is that you have somebody in your office who knows QuickBooks. That's the famous one. They know QuickBooks. Well, that's good. But do they know the financial numbers of your business and why they exist, and also why and how they relate to each other, and what determines the success of the operations of your business? And the answer is, of course not. And so too many times they're working with bookkeepers with one end goal in mind, and they don't know the difference a lot of times.
Right.
The bookkeeper is compiling the numbers for usually one intent and one intent only, and that's to file a tax return.
Right.
Right. And that's not the right reason to have a bookkeeper as part of your stack. You need to have bookkeeping that is going to give you good data, be able to help you understand the data, and also build on that data for the reasons of how you change, how you improve, how you become more efficient in your business.
And I'm going to say the first type of a bookkeeper is an expense to you. The second kind of bookkeeper is an investment in your business.
Great. That's a good one. That's a good
Because
one.
I work with both kinds when I'm working with these clients. And you can tell the quote bookkeeper, who's really just the data input person, you can
Right.
tell that person, and all they really are is an expense to the business because they don't have that knowledge and understanding. Versus, I think one of my favorite clients, over on the East Coast, their bookkeeper has grown by leaps and bounds over the last few years. And now she's able to spot certain things and she's able to question things, and she'll send me an email, hey, this landed here and I don't think this is right, but I don't know, I shouldn't have enough background to know why, but she'll at least reach out, and then we'll hop on a call and figure out what really happened. And but to watch her grow in her skills has been a pretty fun thing to to be a
But
part of.
Diane, that's the other thing in a lot of these businesses. They don't know how to interview them. They don't know
They
how to
don't.
hire them. They don't know how to train them. They don't know how to manage them. And so even if you get somebody like you just described, which by the way, I've met lots of great people that have accomplished this. They have nowhere to learn either.
Right. Yeah.
They don't know where to go. And so, and unless you've been trained in it professionally and academically, you have a void. And not that it can't be something you learn, and I'll call it built, you can build your own plan on this, because that's how I learned originally. So you can do this, but if you have nobody to help you, it's hard.
Well, I see my clients, they invest in training for their installers and their technicians and their salespeople, but nobody invests any training in the rest of the staff sometimes,
No,
which
that's
usually
absolutely
includes the
true.
bookkeeper.
Absolutely, positively true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That is
So,
absolutely true.
and so if we want maximum profit out of this business, we need to be training our bookkeepers so that they can track along, as in addition as the owner themselves are learning and developing their own professional, persona, that their bookkeeper can grow with them.
And there
And
are bookkeeping classes out there.
there are, yep.
Coursera is a source for that. There are private institutions that are out there that train in bookkeeping. I'm not talking about training in QuickBooks. I'm talking about training in bookkeeping.
Bookkeeping in general,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, bookkeeping in general. So and they're not expensive classes.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can't find that type of resource and
Mhm.
have somebody actually take advantage of it.
Right. Well, Lynn, this has been great. We've only covered about half of what we had on the list of things we wanted to cover, but that's okay. This has been some great information, and I'm hoping all of our listeners are starting to say, wow, there's an area here that maybe I haven't spent enough attention to, whether it be the bookkeeper, whether it be your person answering your phone or your bot who's answering your phone, whether it be in how you're using people versus AI. So many different areas that we've talked about. Before we go, I'd like to ask you my final question. Let me get some money here because we have our proud to be profitable bucket here. What is a unique or hidden profit leak that you've seen as you work with businesses in the trades?
The one that I see is what I refer to as the billable hour leak.
Okay, tell us
So
more.
what does that mean? That means if I hire a technician or a resource of any sort that I'm supposed to be billing per hour and make money, you as a bookkeeping company, you should understand this as well as the operators of a trades company, I theoretically need to be looking at utilizing and billing as much of the time that I pay for them as not, right? So what I see as a general rule is that technicians are generally only billed at about 40 to 50% of the time that you pay.
Wow, that's huge. That's a
Well,
big
it is
gaping.
huge. It is
Yes.
huge. And what the industries typically do is they mark up to cover for lack of, the productivity. And the reality of it is we're just pricing for inflation, or I'm sorry, inefficiency, not inflation.
Right.
And if we could bill, just think about it, 1 hour per day for your technician that you're not billing for today, and you did the math, it would be tremendous.
Yes, it would.
Tremendous.
Yes.
So a billable hour, average ticket, billable hour is 250, 300, sometimes $500 an hour. So it is worth a lot of money in your little bucket.
To figure out how can we get one more billable hour per day out of each technician.
That is right.
Yes, that's a great profit lake. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Lynn, how can people get in touch with you, learn more about Contractor In Charge?
Go to our website, contractorincharge.com. Phone number is 813-303-1060. My email is Lynn, Lynn, at contractorincharge.com. Love to hear from any of them.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Listeners, I hope you take Lynn up on this opportunity to go learn more about what her company is doing and her team. And let's start plugging these profit leaks. For those of you that have been following us quite a while, we expose profit leaks on every single episode. So you should be armed with lots of new tools in your toolbox if you continue to pay attention to our program and listen in. Thank you for joining us. We just want to know that your time is important, that you're busy. So thank you for sharing some of your day with us today. We'll catch you on our next episode. Bye-bye.